Teach my grandson and I'll give you everything." Then the selfless waitress uncovered her restaurant empire. Before we continue, light up the comments with hearts from around the world. Let's see how far this story reaches. December rain hammered against the windows of Magnolia Cafe in downtown Seattle, each drop like a tiny fist demanding entry. Through the street glass, a woman stood, watching. Eleanor Whitmore, 73 years old, silver hair pulled into an elegant chignon, eyes sharp as cut diamonds. She'd been standing there for 20 minutes, studying the young waitress inside with the intensity of someone who'd built empires by recognizing what others overlooked. 3 years of silence. Specialists from Stanford to New York who'd accomplished nothing. A 12-year-old boy locked in a soundless world that money couldn't unlock. Until this moment. Inside, the waitress's hands trembled as she set down colored pencils beside a child who hadn't responded to anyone in 3 years. When Eleanor finally spoke to her, when she made her impossible offer, the young woman's face went pale. "I can't be responsible for another child." The words slipped out before she could stop them. And Eleanor knew she'd found exactly what her grandson needed. Someone running from a very gift that could save him. The scent of burnt coffee and day-old pastries hung in the air of Magnolia Cafe, like a promise nobody intended to keep. Claire Morrison moved through the morning rush with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to become invisible. Auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days. Gray eyes that noticed everything while appearing to see nothing. She refilled cups, cleared tables, and smiled at customers with a warmth that never quite reached her eyes. For Claire, this was survival. Minimum wage plus tips that barely covered rent on a studio apartment she'd never bothered to decorate. The kind of temporary existence that could be abandoned in an afternoon if necessary. Gregory, the manager, watched her from behind the register with his perpetual expression of preemptive disapproval. His thin lips pressed together whenever she passed, as if her very presence offended the cafe's ambience. He saw spilled coffee not as an accident, but as a personal assault on the month's profit margin. Claire had learned to anticipate his moods the way sailors read coming storms, necessary for survival, exhausting in practice. In the corner booth, bathed in gray December light, sat a boy who shouldn't have been alone. Michael was 12 years old, though his stillness made him seem both younger and ancient. Dark hair fell across his forehead, framing eyes that looked past everything without seeing anything. Before him sat an untouched mug of hot chocolate, whipped cream long since dissolved into a pale film. Beside that, a leather-bound sketchbook that hadn't been opened in months, its edges worn smooth by hands that no longer remembered their purpose. The man who brought him every Saturday morning, his father, Claire had gathered from overheard conversations, always sat 3 booths away, close enough to supervise, far enough to pretend he wasn't watching his son's silence like it was a terminal diagnosis. Richard Whitmore wore expensive suits even on weekends, carried the tense energy of someone who solved problems for a living, but couldn't solve the one that mattered most. Claire had watched this ritual for 3 months now. Father and son, together but separate, both drowning in different oceans. She understood drowning better than most people realized. Claire balanced 3 plates on her left arm and a coffee pot in her right hand as she navigated the Saturday morning crowd. The cafe hummed with the comfortable noise of people who had nowhere urgent to be. Conversations about weekend plans, the Seahawks' latest game, complaints about Seattle's endless rain. Michael's corner booth sat in its usual bubble of silence. She'd watched other waitresses approach him over the weeks. They always did the same thing, crouched down to his level, spoke in that sing-songy tone adults use with children they've already decided are broken. "Hey there, sweetie. What would you like today?" As if enthusiasm could penetrate 3 years of silence. Claire approached differently. She didn't crouch, didn't make sudden movements or speak in artificial tones. She simply walked to his table, set down a fresh glass of water, and noticed what nobody else seemed to see. The way his fingers rested near the sketchbook, not touching it, but not quite pulling away either. The micro-movements of someone trapped between wanting and fearing. From her apron pocket, Claire pulled out a set of colored pencils. Not expensive ones, just the basic 12-pack from the drugstore down the street. She placed them beside the sketchbook without comment, without expectation, without the weight of hope that made everything harder. Then she did something that would have gotten her fired if Gregory had been watching. She sat down across from Michael. Not to talk, not to engage, just to exist in the same space without demanding anything from him. The rain continued its assault on the windows. Someone's phone rang and went to voicemail. A group of teenagers laughed too loudly at a joke Claire couldn't hear. And Michael's hand moved. It was the smallest gesture, fingers extending, hovering over the blue pencil like it might burn him. His breathing changed shallow and quick. The hand trembled, pulled back, reached forward again. Then he touched it, picked it up, held it like he was remembering what hands were for. Claire didn't react, didn't smile or gasp or do any of the things that would transform this moment into a performance. She simply stood, collected her coffee pot, and moved to the next table as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But outside, through rain-streaked windows, Eleanor Whitmore saw everything. She'd been watching for 20 minutes. This elegant woman in a wool coat that cost more than Claire made in 3 months. Silver hair pulled back with precision, wire-rimmed glasses that caught the gray light. Everything about her suggested wealth, but it was the way she stood, utterly still, utterly focused, that marked her as dangerous. Eleanor had built an empire by recognizing talent others overlooked. She saw potential in overlooked spaces, underestimated people, and opportunities disguised as problems. And in this young waitress who just made a silent boy reach for something, Eleanor recognized exactly what her grandson needed. She pushed through the cafe door, the brass bell announcing her entrance like a declaration of war. Eleanor Whitmore didn't walk into rooms. She claimed them. Despite the casual appearance of her coat and the softness of her voice, every eye in Magnolia Cafe tracked her movement. Some people carried authority like a weapon. Eleanor wore it like skin. She found Claire at the counter, loading dirty mugs onto a tray. "I need to speak with you about my grandson." Claire turned, and for just a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Recognition, fear, calculation. Then the waitress mask slid back into place. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm working. If you need something." That boy in the corner booth. Eleanor's voice cut through the cafe noise like a scalpel. "You're the first person in 3 years who's gotten any response from him." Claire's hands tightened on the tray. "I just gave him some pencils. Nothing special." "Everything about what you just did was special." Eleanor stepped closer, and Claire could smell expensive perfume mixed with something sharper. Desperation, maybe, or determination. "I've spent 3 years watching specialists fail. Psychologists from Stanford, behavioral therapists from New York, people with credentials that cover entire walls, and accomplished nothing." He put down colored pencils, and he moved. "That's just coincidence." But Claire's voice had lost its steadiness. "I don't believe in coincidence. I believe in recognizing competence when I see it." Eleanor's diamond-sharp eyes never wavered. "I'm prepared to make you an offer. Teach my grandson to speak again. Help him find his voice. And I'll give you everything. Money, education, opportunities. Whatever you need to build the life you're clearly running from." The cafe seemed to hold its breath. Even Gregory had stopped pretending not to listen. Claire set down the tray with hands that trembled despite her best efforts. "I'm not interested in your money, ma'am. I'm just trying to serve coffee and mind my own business." "Then you're running from something." It wasn't a question. Eleanor had spent 73 years reading people like quarterly reports, and this young woman was an open book written in guilt and fear. "And whatever you're running from, it involved helping children. I can see it in how you moved around, Michael. Professional training, not instinct. The way you positioned yourself at his eye level without crowding him. The choice of colored pencils instead of markers or crayons. Someone taught you how to reach silent children, and you're very, very good at it." Claire's gray eyes met Eleanor's, and the carefully constructed waitress persona cracked wide open. "I can't or won't. Both." The word came out barely above a whisper. "I can't be responsible for another child." There it was, the truth that explained everything. The fake name, the minimum wage job, the apartment that could be abandoned in an afternoon. This young woman wasn't running from the law, or debt, or a bad relationship. She was running from herself. Eleanor reached into her purse, pulled out a business card, and placed it on the counter between them. Embossed letters, expensive cardstock, a phone number, and nothing else. My grandson hasn't spoken in 3 years. His mother died, and he locked himself in silence like it was the only safe place left. I've tried everything money can buy, and money can buy a lot, but you made him reach for something with colored pencils and patience. I'm sorry about your grandson. Claire's voice had gone flat, all emotion carefully locked away. But I can't help you. You mean you won't risk it? Eleanor picked up her purse, preparing to leave, but not quite ready to surrender. Whatever happened in your past, whoever you failed or think you failed, my grandson is here now, alive, reachable, and you're the first person who's made him remember that hands can create instead of just exist. She turned toward the door, then paused. The card has my number. When you're ready to stop running, call me. Michael will still be silent, and you'll still be the only person who knows how to reach him. The brass bell chimed as Eleanor left, and Claire stood frozen at the counter, staring at the business card like it was a bomb with a timer she couldn't see. The rain had intensified by the time Claire's shift ended, transforming the parking lot into a minefield of puddles that reflected streetlights like broken mirrors. She pulled her jacket tighter and headed for her car, a 2008 Honda Civic with rust eating through the wheel wells and a passenger door that only opened from the inside. Eleanor Whitmore leaned against a black Mercedes, utterly unconcerned about the rain soaking through her expensive coat. How did you? Claire stopped, realizing the question was pointless. People like Eleanor Whitmore didn't wait in parking lots by accident. Your background check was too clean. Eleanor's voice carried easily over the rain. Perfect references, seamless work history, not a single gap or inconsistency, which means someone very competent built you a new identity, and they knew exactly what employers look for. Claire's hand tightened on her car keys. I don't know what you're talking about. Claire Morrison didn't exist before 6 months ago. No social media history, no digital footprint, nothing before your first apartment lease in Seattle. Eleanor pushed off from the Mercedes, taking 2 steps closer. Rain ran down her face, but she didn't blink. I don't care what you're running from. I don't care what name you used before or what mistakes you think define you. I care that my grandson touched a pencil for the first time in 3 years because you understood something 12 expensive specialists missed. You had me investigated? Claire's voice shook with something between fear and fury. I'd burn down the world to save my grandson. Having you investigated was easy. Eleanor pulled out another business card, this one with an address written on the back in precise handwriting. This is where we live, Mercer Island. Come Monday at 9 a.m. or don't come at all. But understand this, Michael is running out of time. Not physically, emotionally. Every day he spends locked in silence makes it harder to find his way back. You know this because you understand trauma, and that means you've survived it yourself. She walked to her Mercedes, opened the door, then turned back one final time. I'm offering you a chance to transform someone's life. Maybe in the process, you'll transform your own. The Mercedes pulled away, taillights bleeding red through the rain. Claire stood in the parking lot, business card dissolving in her shaking hand, and wondered if running was even possible anymore. Claire's apartment in Capitol Hill could barely be called lived in. One room serving as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. Furniture from Goodwill that didn't quite match. Walls bare except for the landlord's beige paint. The kind of space designed for people passing through, not putting down roots. She sat on the edge of her bed, just a mattress on a metal frame, and stared at Eleanor's business card. The rain had smudged the ink, but the address remained legible. Mercer Island, where Seattle's wealthy built estates with water views and gates that kept the world at a comfortable distance. Her phone sat beside her, screen dark, containing a single contact labeled simply J. The flashbacks came whether she wanted them or not. Hospital corridors that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. A child's laughter, bright and trusting, cut short by machines that suddenly screamed wrong notes. Newspaper headlines she'd forced herself to stop reading after the first dozen crucified her in print. She'd reviewed the dosage 3 times. 3 times. It wasn't her fault that the pharmacy had filled the prescription incorrectly, that a decimal point in the wrong place had transformed medicine into poison. But fault and responsibility weren't the same thing, and dead was still dead. Claire picked up her phone, dialed the only number in it. Someone's asking questions. Her voice sounded hollow even to herself. The woman on the other end, Jay, whose real name Claire had never learned, responded with the calm efficiency of someone who'd helped people disappear before. How persistent. She knows Claire Morrison is fake. She's already run background checks. A pause that stretched too long. Then it's time to move again. I can have new documents ready by Tuesday. Denver this time, or maybe Portland. Claire looked at the business card dissolving in her palm. What if I don't want to move? Then you're not running anymore. And that means dealing with whatever you left behind. Jay's voice softened slightly. Is it worth the risk? Claire ended the call without answering. She pulled out her laptop, another Goodwill special with a crack screen, and typed a name she'd avoided for months. Michael Whitmore. The search results appeared instantly. Local news article from 3 years ago. Prominent Seattle attorney's wife dies in car accident. Sarah Whitmore, 34, mother of one, killed when a drunk driver ran a red light on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The timeline matched. Sarah died 3 years ago in November. Emma Rodriguez, the girl Claire couldn't save, died 3 years ago in October. 2 children 1 month apart, both losing everything. The difference was Michael still had a chance. Claire stared at Eleanor's address until her vision blurred, and for the first time in 3 years, she wondered if maybe running was the wrong answer. The Whitmore estate sat on Mercer Island like something from a different century. All stone and glass and views of Lake Washington that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Claire's Honda looked absurd in the circular driveway, parked between a Tesla and what she thought might be a Bentley. She'd come. That was the terrifying part. She'd actually driven across the bridge Monday morning and knocked on a door that probably cost more than her car. Eleanor answered, looking exactly as composed as she had in the rain-soaked parking lot. I wasn't certain you'd come. I'm not certain I should have. Honesty. Good. We'll need that. Eleanor stepped aside, gesturing her in. My son is protective. He's also skeptical. Try not to take it personally. The interior matched the exterior. Expensive, but not ostentatious. Designed by someone with taste and unlimited budget. Original artwork on walls, hardwood floors that gleamed, furniture that looked simultaneously comfortable and like it belonged in a museum. Richard Whitmore stood in what Claire assumed was a study, arms crossed, wearing the expression of a man forced to try one more hopeless solution. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with Michael's dark hair and the kind of exhausted eyes that came from 3 years of watching your child disappear. Ms. Morrison. His voice carried the professional courtesy of someone who'd learned to be polite while trusting no one. My mother seems convinced you can help my son. I've heard that before from people with actual degrees. I'm not promising anything. Claire met his gaze directly, but I'd like to try. Eleanor interrupted before Richard could respond. Here are the ground rules. Claire has complete control over Michael's treatment. 6 weeks trial period. No interference, no second-guessing, no hovering. If you can't agree to that, Richard, we'll end this now. The lawyer in Richard wanted to argue. Claire could see it in the set of his jaw. But the father, the desperate part that had already tried everything, simply nodded. His room was upstairs. Michael's room was a shrine to a life interrupted. Toys lined shelves with the precision of museum displays. Action figures still in packaging, puzzles never opened. Books with uncracked spines. But it was the walls that broke Claire's heart. Photographs of Sarah Whitmore covered every surface. Sarah laughing at a beach. Sarah holding infant Michael. Sarah and Michael building sandcastles, blowing out birthday candles, reading bedtime stories. The room wasn't designed for a child to heal. It was designed to preserve grief. Michael sat on his bed, the same vacant expression she'd seen at the cafe. Dark hair falling across his forehead, small hands folded in his lap, eyes that looked past everything. Claire sat on the floor, not on the bed, not in a chair, but on the carpet at a distance that felt respectful rather than invasive. She didn't speak immediately, didn't launch into therapeutic questions or try to establish rapport with forced cheerfulness. She simply existed in the same space, letting the silence settle like dust. Finally, she spoke. You don't need to be fixed. You just need someone who understands that silence sometimes feels safer than speaking. Michael didn't respond, didn't look at her, but his breathing changed just slightly. The first sign that maybe somewhere behind the walls he'd built, someone was listening. Week 1 passed in careful increments. Claire arrived every morning at 9, spent 3 hours with Michael, and left with notes she never showed Richard or Eleanor. She didn't push for breakthroughs or demand progress. She simply showed up, consistent as sunrise, and made herself a safe presence in a world that had proven catastrophically unsafe. By Friday, she suggested something that made Richard's lawyer instincts rebel. "I want to take Michael to Green Lake Park." Richard stood in the kitchen, coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. He doesn't like leaving the house. He doesn't like a lot of things right now. That's not the same as incapable. Claire kept her voice gentle but firm. Silence is often about control. Controlling the environment, controlling what can hurt you. "I want to introduce unpredictability in a safe way." Eleanor, who'd been listening from the doorway, nodded once. "Take him." The park spread around Green Lake like nature's argument against Seattle's reputation for rain. Today, spring sunshine broke through clouds, turning the water into hammered silver. Ducks paddled near the shore, hopeful for bread, but the posted signs explicitly forbade feeding them. Claire had brought bread anyway, and Michael sat on the grass near the water's edge. She didn't try to make him feed the ducks or engage with his surroundings. She simply tore bread into pieces and tossed them, narrating nothing, expecting nothing. Michael's shoulders perpetually rigid, relaxed by increments she wouldn't have noticed if she hadn't been trained to look for exactly these signs. After 20 minutes, Claire pulled out a sketchbook, not Michael's leather-bound one, but a cheap spiral notebook from the drugstore. She began drawing. Nothing skilled or artistic, just simple shapes and lines. A duck, terrible proportions, worse shading, but recognizable. Michael watched. Claire drew a tree, equally awful. Then she set down the pencil and simply sat, looking at the water. That's when it happened. Michael's hand moved across the grass, fingers closing around the blue pencil she'd left casually between them. He pulled the sketchbook closer, and he drew a single line, just one, blue, slightly wavy, horizontal across the page. But it was intentional, deliberate, the first creative act he'd made in 3 years. 30 feet away, sitting on a bench with a newspaper she wasn't reading, Eleanor Whitmore saw everything. She'd followed them, not hovering, not interfering, but unable to stay away from this moment she'd spent 3 years hoping for. The line meant something. Eleanor didn't know what, not yet, but she understood with absolute certainty that she'd been right about Claire Morrison. This young woman with the haunted eyes and fake name knew exactly how to reach silent children. The question was why, and what it had cost her to learn. Eleanor's private study occupied the entire 3rd floor of the Mercer Island estate, a space Richard barely entered and Michael had never seen. Walls lined with documentation of an empire built in shadows, contracts, property deeds, financial statements for 37 restaurants spanning from Boston to San Diego. Her late husband, Thomas, had taken credit for 40 years, while Eleanor did the actual work, built the menus, negotiated the leases, hired the chefs who'd gone on to win James Beard Awards. Thomas had played golf with investors and posed for magazine profiles, while Eleanor transformed a single Seattle bistro into a regional empire. Now Thomas was 6 months dead, and Eleanor faced her final project, ensuring Michael inherited something worth having, taught by someone who understood what really mattered. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd used 3 times before, always for situations requiring absolute discretion. "Marcus?" "Eleanor Whitmore. I need a comprehensive background check." Marcus, specialized in finding things people preferred stayed hidden. Divorce attorneys loved him. Eleanor had used him twice to investigate potential business partners, and once to confirm her suspicions about Thomas's affair with his secretary. Subject name: Claire Morrison. Mid-20s, works at Magnolia Cafe in Seattle, living in Capitol Hill. I need everything: employment history, education, previous addresses, legal troubles, everything she's done since birth. Timeline? Fast. Money is not a constraint. 3 days later, Marcus called back with a file that raised more questions than it answered. "Ms. Whitmore, Claire Morrison is exceptionally clean, almost suspiciously so. Perfect references, seamless employment history, not a single red flag. But here's the thing. She didn't exist before 6 months ago." Eleanor leaned forward in her leather chair. Explain. No social media presence before March. No digital footprint. Her work references, check out when you call them. But when I dug deeper, they're all from businesses with staff turnover or managers who've since left. Her apartment lease is the first legal document with her name on it. It's a professionally constructed identity, which means someone very good helped her disappear. Then find out who she was before she became Claire Morrison. Marcus hesitated. That's significantly more difficult and expensive. I don't care about expensive. I care about thorough. 2 more days. Eleanor spent them watching Claire work with Michael, seeing progress that was subtle but undeniable. Michael's drawings had evolved from single lines to shapes. His posture had softened. Once, he'd made eye contact with Claire that lasted 3 full seconds. When Marcus called again, his voice carried the weight of someone who'd found something he wished he hadn't. Her real name is Dr. Catherine Mills, former child psychologist at Boston Children's Hospital, specialized in trauma and selective mutism. 3 years ago, she had a patient, 7-year-old named Emma Rodriguez. Routine medication adjustment, except the pharmacy filled the prescription wrong. Decimal point in the wrong place. The girl died from an overdose of medication Dr. Mills prescribed in the correct dosage. Eleanor closed her eyes, pieces clicking into terrible place. The medical board cleared her after a 6-month investigation. Pharmacy admitted fault. Family received a settlement. But Dr. Mills testified at the inquiry, and someone recorded it. You can find the video online if you know where to look. Sending everything. Eleanor watched the testimony video 3 times, watching Catherine Mills, young, devastated, wearing guilt like armor, explain in excruciating detail how she'd reviewed the dosage 3 times, how she'd followed every protocol, how none of it mattered because Emma Rodriguez was still dead. It wasn't my fault, Catherine said in the video, voice breaking. But that doesn't make Emma any less gone. That doesn't give her parents their daughter back. That doesn't mean I deserve to keep helping children when I couldn't save the one who trusted me most. 2 weeks after the medical board's decision, Dr. Catherine Mills had vanished, quit her job, abandoned her apartment, disappeared so completely that even her former colleagues thought she might have died. She hadn't died. She'd become Claire Morrison, slinging coffee in Seattle, running from the gift that could have saved hundreds of children, running from herself. Eleanor sat in her study until the sunset turned Lake Washington into liquid gold, and she understood exactly what she needed to do. Eleanor found Claire in Michael's room on a Wednesday afternoon, both of them drawing in companionable silence. Michael had progressed to shapes that almost resembled objects, a house, maybe, or a car. Claire's drawings remained deliberately terrible, maintaining a safe space where Michael didn't have to be good, just present. A word, please. Claire followed Eleanor to the study, dread settling in her stomach like concrete. The older woman closed the door with deliberate care, then turned with an expression that revealed nothing. You were someone important before Seattle. Not a question. Claire's carefully constructed defenses snapped into place. I don't know what. Stop. Eleanor's voice cut through the deflection like surgical steel. I know you're running. I know whatever you're running from involved children and catastrophic loss. I don't need to know more unless you choose to tell me. But I do need to know if you're committed to helping Michael, or if this is just another temporary stop before you disappear again. Claire's hands trembled. She shoved them in her pockets where Eleanor couldn't see. I can't make promises about the future. Then let me make this simple. Eleanor moved to her desk, pulled out a legal document, slid it across the polished surface. This is a contract. 6 months, not 6 weeks. You work with Michael using whatever methods you deem appropriate. You receive a salary of $10,000 per month, paid weekly, no questions asked. In exchange, I stop investigating your past and you commit to seeing this through. And after 6 months? After 6 months, we renegotiate. Or you disappear again and I won't stop you. Eleanor's diamond-sharp eyes softened slightly. But Claire, or whatever your real name is, my grandson is making progress for the first time in 3 years. You understand his silence in a way no one else has. That's worth whatever you're running from. Claire stared at the contract, at the impossible amount of money, at the commitment that terrified her more than anything else. What if I fail him? What if whatever I do makes things worse? Then we'll deal with it together. Eleanor picked up a pen, set it beside the contract. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to try. That's all Michael needs. Someone who shows up and tries without expecting him to be anything other than exactly what he is right now. The pen felt heavy in Claire's hand, heavier than it should have been, weighted with implications and promises and the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could help another child without destroying them. She signed Catherine Mills's fake name and wondered if Eleanor noticed the hesitation before the C. 6 months, Claire said quietly. But the same rules apply. No one investigates me further. No one asks questions about who I was before. And when this is done, I disappear. Eleanor nodded once, the gesture containing both agreement and the unspoken certainty that 6 months could change everything, including Claire's certainty that running was the only option. Michael drew his first recognizable object that afternoon, a simple house with windows and a door. But he drew it in blue, the color of the first pencil he touched, the color of the single line at Green Lake Park, the color of someone slowly remembering that silence wasn't the only safe place left. Month 2 of working with Michael revealed patterns that would have gone invisible to anyone without Catherine's training. His drawings had evolved from tentative lines into increasingly complex compositions. Oceans rendered in shades of blue that grew deeper with each sketch, empty chairs positioned in rooms without walls, birds rendered with wings folded as if permanently grounded. The symbolism was devastatingly clear to someone who'd spent years learning to read the language children used when their voices refused to cooperate. Catherine sat across from Michael in the garden room, a glass-walled space overlooking Puget Sound, filled with plants that somehow survived Seattle's persistent gloom. Michael drew with the focused intensity of someone pouring everything he couldn't speak directly into the pencil's tip. Then he drew her, a figure with red hair, rendered in careful detail, not stylized or cartoonish, but recognizable. His mother's hair, his mother's shoulders, his mother's presence captured in blue pencil on white paper. This was the first true communication between them that transcended therapeutic technique. This was Michael deliberately choosing to show Catherine something he'd been carrying alone. Catherine didn't react with exclamation or praise. She simply acknowledged it. That's your mom. Michael nodded once, eyes still fixed on the drawing. She had beautiful hair, Catherine said quietly. Michael's pencil moved again, adding details, a specific necklace, a particular curve of his mother's smile. Information that mattered. Information that proved Sarah Whitmore had existed as more than a photograph on his bedroom wall. That evening, Catherine explained to Richard and Eleanor what she'd witnessed. He's processing grief, but he's not ready to verbalize it yet. Catherine sat in Eleanor's study, exhaustion and something like hope warring in her expression. The drawings are his language right now. Each one is him working through what happened, what he lost, what he's afraid of forgetting. That's progress, even though it doesn't look like recovery. Richard leaned forward, lawyer mind searching for measurable outcomes. So he's getting better? He's learning to communicate his pain instead of burying it. Better is a complicated term when we're talking about grief this severe. Catherine's voice carried the careful precision of someone who'd spent years translating trauma into language families could understand. But yes, he's getting better, slowly, in ways that matter. Eleanor watched Catherine with an intensity that suggested she was cataloging every word, every gesture, every indication of what this young woman carried beneath the surface. The file arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by Marcus Chin himself rather than mailed. He sat across from Eleanor in her study, expression grave, and slid the comprehensive dossier across the desk. This one's complicated, Marcus said quietly. Eleanor read the first pages, feeling the complete tragedy unfold in typewritten summary. Dr. Catherine Mills, rising star in pediatric psychology, published researcher, director of the trauma program at Boston Children's Hospital at the extraordinary age of 31. 3 years ago, she'd taken on a routine case. 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez, selective mutism following parental divorce, standard protocol for her specialty. The pharmacy had miscalculated. A decimal point in the wrong place transformed medicine into poison. Emma died during a routine medication adjustment. Completely preventable. Completely Eleanor's fault, legally speaking. Though the medical board's investigation cleared her within months when the pharmacy admitted liability and the investigation revealed Catherine's meticulous documentation and procedure adherence. But Eleanor found the video testimony that mattered more than any legal ruling. Catherine Mills sat in front of a hospital review board, composed but shattered behind her professional demeanor. I reviewed the dosage 3 times. 3 times. I followed every protocol established by the hospital. I consulted with the supervising physician. I documented everything. Her voice remained steady, but her hands trembled in her lap. It wasn't my fault. That's what the board will conclude. And they're right. The pharmacy made the error. But that doesn't make Emma less dead. It doesn't give her parents their daughter back. It doesn't mean I deserve to keep helping children when I couldn't save the one who trusted me most. Eleanor watched Catherine's face as she continued. I'm withdrawing from the field effective immediately. I'm recommending my cases be transferred to qualified colleagues. And I'm requesting that my name be removed from the published research I conducted with Emma's cohort, because I can't in good conscience take credit for anything when Emma Rodriguez is in a grave instead of a classroom. The board chair had tried to convince her otherwise. Catherine had declined, collected her personal effects, and disappeared so completely that even her former colleagues lost track of her. Catherine Mills didn't die. She became Claire Morrison, slinging coffee in Seattle, running from the gift that could have transformed hundreds of children's lives. Eleanor closed the file and understood with absolute certainty that she couldn't let that happen. Eleanor orchestrated the meeting with the precision of a general planning invasion. She arrived at Magnolia Cafe on a Thursday afternoon during the slow period between lunch and dinner rush. Gregory was in the back, which meant Claire worked the floor alone. Eleanor sat at a corner booth and ordered coffee she didn't intend to drink. When Claire brought it, Eleanor gestured to the seat across from her. Sit. I can't. I'm working. Gregory won't notice. Sit. Something in Eleanor's voice made argument impossible. Claire sat, her movements rigid with dread, already calculating exits and escape routes. Eleanor pulled the file from her purse and slid it across the table. Claire's face drained of color. Her hands clenched into fists so tight her nails drew crescents into her palms. I know who you are, Dr. Mills. I know what happened to Emma Rodriguez. I know the medical board cleared you within 6 months. I know you walked away from a gift that could help hundreds of children because you couldn't forgive yourself for one death that wasn't your fault. Eleanor's voice remained level, conversational, which somehow made the words land harder. I know you've spent 3 years running, working minimum wage jobs, living in apartments you never bothered to decorate, preparing to disappear the moment someone gets too close. Stop. Claire's voice came out barely audible. Please stop. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to tell you the truth that you've been too afraid to believe. Eleanor leaned forward, and something in her expression gentled. The fierce determination of a grandmother and the weary compassion of someone who'd spent 73 years learning how to reach people drowning in their own guilt. Every time you see Michael, I know you see Emma. Every breakthrough feels like a betrayal. What if you fail into? What if your help makes things worse? Claire's carefully constructed walls crumbled. 3 years of suppressed emotion crashed through her defenses like a dam, fracturing under impossible pressure. Tears streamed down her face, her shoulders shaking with sobs she couldn't control, couldn't contain, couldn't hide anymore. I can't save him, she whispered. I couldn't save her and I can't save him. Eleanor reached across the table and took Claire's trembling hands. Then you'll fail. But right now my grandson is drawing for the first time in 3 years because you gave him colored pencils and patience. Emma's parents would give anything to have their daughter back, but Michael is here, alive, reachable. Don't let Emma's death cause Michael's silence to become permanent. Don't let your fear destroy another child. Claire's breaking point became her turning point. That evening, she returned to the Whitmore estate with tear-stained cheeks and the beginning of something that looked like acceptance. Eleanor had known her secret, had known her history, and hadn't sent her away. For the first time in 3 years, Claire Morrison, Dr. Catherine Mills, considered the possibility that maybe running wasn't the only option left. The Whitmore estate's gardens bloomed with the enthusiasm of spring finally winning against winter's resistance. Catherine found Michael sitting by the koi pond, sketchbook open, pencil moving in that careful way she'd learned to read as concentration rather than struggle. She sat beside him without speaking. Sometimes silence was the most profound communication available. Michael stopped drawing. He looked at her, not the peripheral awareness he'd shown before, but direct, sustained eye contact. His brown eyes met her gray ones for 3 full seconds, and Catherine felt something shift in the geometric proof of his healing. Then, barely audible, Michael hummed 3 notes, a melody so simple it might have been accidental, except for the deliberation in his posture, the intentionality behind every sound. Catherine froze, terrified that any reaction would shatter the moment like glass dropped from impossible height. She simply sat, breathing, present, letting Michael's first intentional vocalization exist in the space between them. He hummed the 3 notes again, then returned to his drawing as if he hadn't just done something miraculous. Catherine's internal monologue crystallized into absolute clarity. This is why I became a psychologist. This moment, this child, this impossible, beautiful breakthrough. She understood now what Eleanor had been trying to tell her. Emma Rodriguez's death had been a tragedy that no amount of self-flagellation could prevent or reverse. But that tragedy didn't have to destroy every child Catherine touched going forward. Michael hummed again while drawing, and Catherine realized something that felt like resurrection. Late night found Catherine standing outside Eleanor's study, hand raised to knock but hesitating. The older woman had said not to investigate further. But investigation wasn't what Catherine needed now. She needed permission to stop running. Eleanor answered her knock with the unsurprised expression of someone who'd expected this exact moment. Come in? Catherine entered the study where so much of this story had been authored. The fireplace crackled with evening warmth. Bookshelves rose toward cathedral ceilings. And Eleanor looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd spent 73 years building empires from nothing. I'll stay, Catherine said, without preamble. Not for 6 months. For however long it takes. For however long Michael needs me. She paused, gathering courage. But you need to know something. I'm terrified. I'm terrified of failing him the way I failed Emma. Eleanor gestured to the leather chair across from her desk. Catherine sat, feeling more vulnerable than she had in 3 years. Good. Eleanor's response was surprising in its simplicity. Fear makes us careful. It's arrogance that destroys children, not caution. Arrogance makes therapists think they're invincible, that their training protects them from tragedy, that they can control outcomes. Fear keeps you humble. Fear keeps you present. Fear keeps you human. Eleanor set down her pen and looked at Catherine directly. And Catherine, you didn't fail Emma Rodriguez. Her pharmacy failed her. You were the one person who fought to save her life until the very end. You held her hand when her parents couldn't be there. You documented everything correctly, followed every protocol, did everything right. And it still wasn't enough because the universe isn't fair and medicine isn't perfect, and sometimes children die anyway. It was the first time anyone had said Catherine's real name with respect instead of accusation. The first time someone had separated her from the tragedy that had consumed her. Emma would want you to help Michael. Eleanor continued. I'm certain of it. Catherine nodded, unable to speak through the storm of emotion, finally finding release. Outside the study, Michael slept in a room where his mother's photographs covered the walls, not as shrines, but as reminders that love transcends silence, that memory keeps people alive, that family is something you build with patience and colored pencils, and the courage to hum 3 notes when the world expects your voice to remain forever locked away. The call came during breakfast. Richard's expression shifted from relaxed to professionally guarded. The lawyer face that meant complications were incoming. Yes, Mother, he said into the phone, glancing toward Michael, who was drawing at the kitchen table. This week? That soon. Catherine and Eleanor exchanged looks that required no verbal communication. Victoria Whitmore, Richard's ex-wife from a second marriage, Michael's stepmother from a union that had lasted for years before imploding spectacularly, didn't visit Seattle without purpose. She arrived the following morning driving a rental car that cost more than most people made annually, elegant in the way wealthy women cultivated. Designer clothing, perfect hair, nails that looked like weapons. But her elegance carried a brittle quality, as if the perfectly assembled exterior might shatter if subjected to any real pressure. Victoria studied Michael with the expression one might reserve for damaged artwork. He still hasn't spoken? He's making progress, Richard said carefully. Progress. Victoria turned to Eleanor with raised eyebrows. Mother-in-law, I hear you've hired a waitress to treat my stepson. What kind of desperation is this? Eleanor's voice remained perfectly pleasant. She's not a waitress. She's exactly what Michael needs. She's exactly what desperation looks like. Victoria settled onto Eleanor's pristine sofa like she was claiming territory. I've spoken with lawyers. Michael is my stepson, and I have legal standing regarding his welfare. A minimum wage worker with no credentials, treating a severely traumatized child? That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Catherine has been working miracles, Eleanor said quietly. Catherine. Victoria's laugh held no warmth. That's her name? How quaint. Richard, you can't seriously believe that hiring this woman is appropriate. The boy needs professional care at an accredited facility, not some coffee shop girl playing therapist. Catherine entered the kitchen then, carrying Michael's finished drawing, a rendering of his mother and himself, rendered in blues and greens that suggested water, safety, the possibility of floating rather than drowning. Victoria's eyes calculated, dismissed, weaponized in quick succession. You must be the waitress. How long have you been working here? 2 months, Catherine said quietly. And how many years of formal training do you have in child psychology? Victoria. Eleanor's voice carried warning. I'm simply asking. Victoria stood, moving with predatory grace. Because if this woman is practicing psychology without proper licensing, that's fraud. And if my stepson's condition deteriorates under her care, that's malpractice. I'm concerned as a stepmother that appropriate safeguards aren't in place. Eleanor's expression hardened into something unyielding. Your concern is noted. But Michael is Richard's legal responsibility, and Richard has approved this arrangement. Then perhaps Richard needs to understand the consequences. Victoria's smile turned dangerous. Michael hasn't shown measurable progress in 3 years. If he hasn't recovered significant verbal communication within 1 month, I'll file for emergency custody and pursue residential placement at a qualified facility. Professional care, not amateur experimentation. The threat hung in the air like something toxic. Subscribe now, because some stories involve threats that change everything, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Victoria's deadline became a weight that Catherine carried into every session with Michael. 1 month, 30 days. Enough time for a miracle or absolute failure with no middle ground. Catherine felt it pressing down with each interaction, and pressure has a way of transforming careful professionals into desperate ones. She began suggesting longer sessions, more intensive work, subtle pressure for Michael to vocalize, even when his drawing suggested he needed silence more than speech. She was doing exactly what the expensive specialists had done, making his silence into a problem instead of recognizing it as a symptom. Michael regressed. The humming stopped. His drawings became darker, black lines dominating where blue had previously suggested hope. The empty chairs multiplied. The birds stopped attempting flight. Richard noticed first. You're doing what the specialists did, making his silence the problem instead of the symptom. Catherine's realization hit like physical impact. She'd spent 3 years running from her failures, and now she was repeating those exact patterns with Michael. She found him in the garden room, working with charcoal instead of colored pencil, creating things that looked like they belonged in darker stories. Catherine sat beside him and spoke words that cost her everything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I forgot that you're not a project to be fixed. You're a person who gets to heal at your own pace. I put pressure on you because I was scared, and that was wrong. Can you forgive me? Michael looked at her, understanding in his young eyes, and picked up the blue pencil he'd abandoned. He drew a single line, then another, and another, until blue replaced black, and the geometry of his drawing shifted back towards something resembling hope. Eleanor's annual restaurant industry gala transformed the Four Seasons Seattle ballroom into something resembling Gatsby's fever dream. 200 people representing the hospitality industry's elite. Investors, executive chefs, restaurant owners, food critics. The walls dripped with expensive flowers. The catering alone cost more than most people earned monthly. Victoria insisted Catherine attend as part of the staff. The humiliation was clearly intentional. Catherine arrived in a borrowed dress that didn't quite fit, feeling like an imposter among actual wealth. She tried to remain inconspicuous, but Victoria found her within minutes, vodka martini in hand, eyes glittering with the particular meanness that wealth sometimes cultivated. "Everyone," Victoria announced to the assembled crowd, "this is the woman treating my stepson. A waitress playing psychologist. Isn't that inspiring?" The room went quiet. Conversations suspended. Attention fixed like predator instinct on wounded prey. Before Eleanor could respond, Michael appeared at the ballroom entrance. He'd snuck downstairs with the housekeeper's help, dressed in his best clothes, with determination in his young face that suggested he'd made a decision about what mattered. He walked directly to Catherine through 200 pairs of watching eyes. He took her hand. Then Michael Whitmore, who hadn't spoken a clear word in 3 years, spoke. "Safe." His voice was small and uncertain, but absolutely intentional. He pointed at Catherine. "Safe." The room erupted. Victoria's face went pale. Richard stood, tears streaming down his face, watching his son reclaim something he'd thought lost forever. Michael continued, each word wresting itself from silence like something being born. "Mom Magan, but Claire safe." Not complete sentences, not eloquent, but devastatingly, beautifully clear. Eleanor moved to Victoria, and when she spoke, her voice cut through the noise like a scalpel. He just spoke his first clear words in 3 years, in front of 200 witnesses. "That's what Claire accomplished. That's what you tried to destroy." Victoria's shock rapidly evolved into something more dangerous. The realization that her leverage had evaporated. Victoria shifted tactics because she was fundamentally a predator, and predators don't stop hunting just because their first approach failed. She hired her own investigator. 3 days later, she possessed the same information that Marcus had provided Eleanor, complete with Dr. Catherine Mills's history, the Emma Rodriguez tragedy, the medical board clearance, and the legal implications of an unlicensed practitioner providing psychological treatment. Victoria's plan took shape with the precision of someone with unlimited resources and absolute willingness to weaponize them. She'd expose Catherine in court as a fraud, press criminal charges for practicing psychology without licensure, destroy the credibility that Michael's breakthrough had begun to establish. And then, with Catherine discredited and removed, she'd pursue custody again. This time with proof that Eleanor and Richard had hired an unqualified charlatan to treat a vulnerable child. It was, from Victoria's perspective, brilliant strategy. What Victoria didn't understand was that Eleanor had anticipated this move months ago and had been quietly preparing her own counterstrike. Subscribe, because what happens when someone tries to destroy the people you love often determines whether your story ends in tragedy or triumph. Eleanor's investigator had been tracking Victoria's financial movements long before the threat of custody battles materialized. Marcus Chun presented his findings with the careful precision of someone who discovered something that would reshape the entire conflict. "She's been stealing from Michael's trust fund," Marcus said quietly, sliding documents across Eleanor's desk. Systematic withdrawals, claimed as expenses for his care and treatment. 3 years of embezzlement, totaling approximately $1.2 million. Eleanor's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on her pen. "Prove it." "It's already proven. Every withdrawal is documented." She claimed authority as his legal guardian during Richard's period of diminished capacity after Sarah's death. And technically, she had access through the trust account. But the amounts exceed what any legitimate expenses could justify. And the pattern suggests intentional fraud. Eleanor smiled, not with warmth, but with the particular satisfaction of someone who just trapped a predator in a cage of its own design. When Victoria arrived at the Whitmore estate the following morning, convinced she was orchestrating an intervention about Catherine's licensing, she walked directly into Eleanor's study to find both Eleanor and Marcus waiting. Eleanor placed the evidence on her desk with the precision of a prosecutor presenting a murder weapon. "You can expose Dr. Mills and face criminal charges for theft and embezzlement of Michael's trust fund," Eleanor said calmly. "Or you can sign over all claims to Michael's custody and disappear from our lives completely. Choose." Victoria's face cycled through shock to fury to the particular desperation of someone watching their leverage evaporate. She tried threats, blustering, legal posturing. But Marcus's documentation was airtight, and Eleanor's patience had expired. By noon, Victoria had signed papers transferring custody and agreed to leave Seattle immediately or face prosecution. By evening, she was gone, and the empire that Victoria had tried to use as a weapon against them remained exactly where it belonged, in Eleanor's hands, available to transform into something healing. Eleanor arranged the meeting with absolute determination and absolutely no hesitation about forcing confrontation. Catherine's terror was visible. Trembling hands, pale face, the particular dread of someone about to confront the grave of her greatest failure. "I can't do this. I can't see them." "You can and you will," Eleanor said simply. "You need closure, and they need to see what their daughter's memory inspired." The Rodriguez family entered Eleanor's study like people walking toward a memorial. Photos of Emma in their hands, a 7-year-old girl with bright smile and hopeful eyes, captured at birthday parties and beach trips and ordinary moments made precious by their finality. Catherine's knees nearly buckled when she saw them. This was the family whose daughter she'd been unable to save, whose grief she'd carried like a stone around her neck for 3 years. Mr. Rodriguez extended his hand. "Dr. Mills, I'm Miguel. This is Maria, Emma's mother. We want to thank you for what you did for Michael Whitmore." Catherine stared at them, unable to process kindness from a source she'd expected only condemnation. "The pharmacy admitted fault 2 years ago," Miguel continued. "We received settlement. We know you fought for Emma. The nurses told us everything. You stayed with her when we couldn't be there. You held our daughter's hand when she died." Maria stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried the particular authority of a mother protecting someone she loved. "Emma loved you. She talked about Dr. Catherine constantly. She'd be heartbroken to know you stopped helping kids because of what happened to her. Emma believed in you. I need you to believe in yourself the way she did." They brought a gift, Emma's favorite book Where the Wild Things Are, with an inscription on the inside cover written in a child's careful handwriting. "For Dr. Catherine, who helps me feel safe. Love, Emma." Catherine's 3 years of suppressed grief finally found release. She sobbed, and the Rodriguez family held the way you hold someone being rescued from drowning. "Emma's legacy doesn't have to be your destruction," Maria whispered. "It can be every child you help going forward. Make that choice, Dr. Catherine. Make her proud." 2 months after Victoria's exit, spring had transformed Green Lake Park into something approximating hope. Cherry blossoms fell like snow, coating the path where Catherine and Michael walked, feeding ducks that had learned to recognize them. Michael walked with a particular lightness of someone no longer carrying the weight of 3 years of silence. "Mom used to bring me here," he said suddenly, speaking in complete sentences now, his voice still small, but increasingly confident. "She'd make up stories about the ducks, having secret meetings underwater, about them discussing important things while the world thought they were just swimming." Catherine listened with the profound attention that had always been her gift. "I stopped talking because if I talked about her, it made her really gone." Michael watched the ducks paddle, understanding reflected in his expression. "But you never made me talk about her. You just let me remember her in the quiet. You let me decide when I was ready to use my voice again. Your mom sounded like she was wonderful at making ordinary things magical," Catherine said quietly. "She was—" Michael paused, considering something important. "Like you." Then the question that changed everything. "Can I call you Catherine instead of Claire? Claire feels like pretending, and we don't pretend anymore." Catherine felt something shift inside her, the final piece of her own healing clicking into place. She didn't have to be Claire Morrison anymore. She could be Catherine Mills again, the woman Emma Rodriguez had believed in, the psychologist Michael Whitmore needed, the person Eleanor had seen when nobody else was looking. "Yes," Catherine said simply. "Catherine is perfect." Eleanor's study remained exactly what it had always been, the nerve center of an empire built in shadows. But now Catherine entered it as something other than a desperate woman with a fake name. She entered as someone Eleanor had claimed as family. "I told you I'd give you everything, Dr. Mills." "Here's what that means," Eleanor said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Catherine sat, expecting acknowledgement, perhaps some kind of bonus for her work with Michael. What she received was something infinitely more significant. I own the restaurant empire. 37 establishments across 12 states, valued at $180 million. Built while Thomas took credit for 40 years while I did the actual work. Eleanor's voice carried the particular bitterness of someone who'd been invisible to someone she'd loved. I'm dying, Catherine. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months to a year. Richard will inherit the restaurants, but he's a lawyer, not a restaurateur. Michael will inherit Richard's share when he's 25, but by then he'll need guidance from someone who understands both children and business. Catherine understood where this was heading, and the scope of it seemed impossible. I want you to become Michael's permanent guardian, not just his therapist, his mother, formally, legally, completely. Eleanor pulled out a thick file. I'm giving you 30% ownership stake in the empire, a position as psychological consultant for all Whitmore properties, designing employee wellness programs, co-management of Michael's education trust fund, enough resources to build any life you choose, while raising my grandson to be the kind of man his mother would be proud of. Eleanor can't. You can and you will. I didn't go through 3 years of investigation, manipulation, and humiliating Victoria Whitmore just to let you disappear. Eleanor's expression softened. You saved my grandson. Now help me save the empire that will be his legacy. Give him the mother figure he lost and the financial security to pursue any dream. Transform what happened to Emma into something that helps hundreds of children going forward. Catherine tried to speak, but Eleanor continued. You didn't fail Emma Rodriguez. You've been honoring her memory by abandoning the only thing that could help other Emmas. That ends now. 6 months later, summer had transformed the Whitmore estate garden into something resembling paradise. Cherry blossoms had given way to roses, and roses had bloomed into the particular abundance that late summer brings. The ceremony was small but significant. Richard, Michael, close friends, and the Rodriguez family gathered to witness Catherine's formal adoption of Michael finalized on the same day Eleanor breathed her last peaceful breath. Not a wedding between Catherine and Richard. He found someone else. Someone who understood that gratitude and love weren't necessarily the same thing, but a family binding. Michael stood between his adoptive mother and his father, speaking with the clear voice he'd reclaimed, delivering a speech that would have shattered anyone still pretending this wasn't a moment of absolute transformation. Eleanor taught me that family isn't just blood. Mom gave me life. Catherine gave me my voice back. Eleanor gave us both a future. Michael's eyes glistened with tears that flowed freely now. I want to reveal something she was planning. A foundation in Emma Rodriguez's name. The Emma Rodriguez Memorial Foundation for Children's Mental Health. Catherine will direct it, and the first recipient is a full scholarship for therapy training named after Catherine Mills. He paused, looking directly at Catherine. So Emma helped save me, and now Catherine gets to help save other kids. That's what Eleanor wanted. That's what we're going to do. A video message played, Eleanor's voice, recorded weeks before, knowing the end was approaching. Catherine, you tried to give me back my money from the beginning. Now I'm ensuring you can never escape it. Use this empire to help every child who needs their voice found. Transform your guilt into grace. Transform Emma's death into purpose. That's what real redemption looks like. The reception continued into evening, with Eleanor's favorite music playing, her favorite wines being served, and the particular sense of completion that comes when a story finally reaches its true ending. 1 year later, Catherine stood in the Seattle Children's Therapy Center, newly opened, funded by the Whitmore Foundation, positioned to serve families who couldn't afford expensive private care. The walls were painted in soft blues and greens, and therapy rooms featured everything she'd learned through 3 years of running and 1 year of becoming. Michael, now 13, volunteered teaching art therapy to younger children. He used the same technique Catherine had used on him. Colored pencils, no pressure, just presence. No forced speech. No impossible expectations. Just space to process pain at whatever pace healing required. A young girl sat across from him, silent as Michael had been, carrying trauma in the particular way that silence sometimes held. Michael set colored pencils on the table between them. Didn't push, didn't explain, just existed, patient and present. The girl looked at the pencils. Her hand trembled. She reached for it and picked up the blue one. She drew a single line. Michael looked at Catherine, who was watching from across the room, and grinned. That means something. Catherine understood then what Eleanor had understood months earlier, that Emma's death didn't have to end in tragedy. It could plant seeds for every child they'd help going forward. Some stories ended in darkness, but there's ended in voices found in futures built. Every child that picked up a blue pencil was Emma getting her second chance through someone else's hands. Every breakthrough was Emma's gift, transformed from tragedy into purpose. Catherine Mills had spent 3 years trying to escape her past. It had taken everything. Eleanor's absolute determination, Michael's quiet persistence, the Rodriguez family's grace, to teach her that some legacies weren't meant to be escaped. They were meant to be transformed. And as she watched another silent child discover that their voice was worth reclaiming, Catherine finally understood what Eleanor had known all along. The real empire wasn't measured in restaurants or square footage or financial statements. It was measured in children who learned that silence didn't have to be permanent, that healing was possible, that someone believed in them enough to sit in the quiet and wait for them to find their way back to sound. That was Catherine's inheritance. That was Michael's future. That was Emma's eternal gift. That was everything Eleanor had promised to give away.